You mentioned the disease being used as an excuse not to allow the bison to expand. In Point Reyes National Seashore, Yoni's disease is used as an excuse to hold the elk and why not to let them outside. But in Point Reyes, that's a completely manufactured political BS excuse because that disease came from the cattle. At
Right.
least in your example, did the disease originate with the wildlife or did that also come from cattle?
That also came from cattle. So brucellosis infection, bison and elk, the origin of that brucellosis is from contact with cattle that had brucellosis. Remember, uh, they didn't start trying to control brucellosis in the United States until about the 1930s. And back in 1900s, 1910, 20s, and stuff. Sometimes cattle and bison were fenced together in the same place, and they were able to pick up the disease. Now, the disease can be picked up by, say, licking a fetus that's aborted or some way like that. But other than that, here's another thing. Uh, Bison bulls and calves and yearlings can't transmit the disease to cattle because they don't breed with cattle under normal situations. They can be forced to breed with cattle, but they don't normally. And yet we're killing all
Wow.
those animals. And then even among bison cows, most of them will reabsorb a fetus that has brucellosis and before they ever abort it. In other words, how would a cow get brucellosis from a bison? About the only way is if a cattle were grazing in a field where bison had been and had just aborted a bison calf that was full of brucellosis, and they came up to it and licked it or licked the grass around there, which was full of brucellosis. But the brucellosis bacteria is not going to survive very long outside of the animal's body. So you have to say, so what are the real chances of that happening? It's very slim. And then the other thing that's interesting that shows that this whole thing is a made up argument is that there have been 20, I think it's 28 instances of ranches around Greater Yellowstone that have gotten brucellosis. And in every instance, it was from elk. But we do not shoot the elk that come out of Yellowstone Park, just as a matter of fact that we're going to shoot every elk that tries to leave. They can wander all over the ecosystem. They get hunted during the hunter season and so forth, but there's no active effort to just keep elk in Yellowstone Park. And so to me, that demonstrates that this is not just about brucellosis.
Right. Not that I would want them killing the elk, but
Right.
if you're going to pretend that the disease is a legitimate concern, then you would be killing those elk.
That's right. And the thing is that I think the real issue is that the bison and cattle have a pretty strong overlap in diet. And I think the fear of the cattle industry is that if bison were to come and be on other public lands like national forest or Bureau of Land Management lands where cattle grazing is permitted, there's a fear in the livestock industry that if push came to shove and you had, so many bison out there and so many cattle and there wasn't enough feed for both, that the public would want to see the cattle reduced, not the bison. And so they don't want to go there. That's a fight they don't want to get into. So the best way to do that is to keep bison from leaving Yellowstone Park.
And now we talk about Point Reyes again because the people do want the elk there. They don't want the cattle there, but due to the political influence of the ranches, the cattle are winning anyway.
Right.
The elk in Point Reyes, for the people who don't know what's happening,